The time has come to put some details onto this very bare air defense platform. There should be two types of mounted binoculars, a compass, and switchboards. Fortunately, I have extra mounted binoculars from my HMS Prince of Wales kit, so I'll be repurposing those over here. On the forward air defense platform, there are 6 mounted binocular positions, 2 for the air defense officers and 4 for the air lookouts. Slightly off center to the port at the front of the forward air defense platform is a compass, and in the middle are 2 switchboards. There are also a number of voice pipes that need to be installed in this area. I will construct those out of lead wire. Figuring out how to pack all of these items into this very small area is going to be a bit of a challenge. So to start this process, I'll mark the locations for the various mounted binoculars. To do this, I will just drill the holes and put the brass mount in those holes to ensure that everything is spaced out reasonably. Once I have the holes drilled for all of the mounted binoculars, I can then put the photo etch on them and complete the installation. From the images that I have seen of the forward air defense platform, the ADO positions go in the middle next to these curved sections of splinter shield. Since it is clear where those positions should go, I start by drilling out those holes first. I'm using a 0.6mm drill bit to create these holes. That is the perfect size for the base of these brass parts that I'm using. Figuring out how close to put the hole to the splinter shield is a bit of a trial and error process. Initially, I made it a bit too close, which meant the base of the brass part butted up against the splinter shield and couldn't sit properly in its hole. So I had to move it out a bit by drilling a little bit sideways. But I got there, and it is able to fit in place now. With a better understanding of where this hole should go, I then repeat this on the other side, giving it a little bit more space to the splinter shield. This side goes a little bit better. Now to drill out the locations for the forward ALOs. These go slightly inboard from the ADO positions, but they need to be spaced far enough such that a compass can go between them and then still be slightly off-center to the port. After working out the location for the forward ALOs, I mark the positions with a hobby knife and then drill out the holes. Once again, my drilling wasn't perfect. One of the holes moved a little bit off the line that I wanted it to be on, so it required a little more finessing to get it back into position. That did mean that there was a rather large hole that could be seen from the side once the brass part was installed on top of it. But that's not much of a problem. I can quite easily fill that gap with super glue a bit later on. Next, I'll make the holes for the aft ALOs on the forward air defense platform. Once again, I just use the drill to drill out a hole. Finally, I seem to be getting the hang of this, and I'm able to drill them in the correct location the first time. Next, I need to make some holes on the upper air defense platform. Here, it's not so clear to me exactly what should be installed on this platform. From the schematic that I've seen, there should be at least 2 ADO positions. These go near the aft of the platform, so I drill those out. There are also 2 smaller mounts forward of these ADOs on the upper air defense platform. I'm not sure what they are, but on the schematic, they are a similar size to the ALOs, although I'm not sure how much I can really read into a basic drawing like this. Nevertheless, I have extra ALOs, so I'll use an ALO mount to represent whatever these things are. One problem that the upper air defense platform mounts face that is not a problem for the forward air defense platform mounts is that the pins that go in the hole are quite long and protrude through the platform. Since the underside of the platform is visible on this model, on the upper air defense platform, these can be seen. This means that they need to be shortened so that they are not visible. To shorten the pins, I clamp the mount in a vise and then use a file to reduce the length of the pin. Quick test fit reveals that the pin is now short enough and cannot be seen from the side of the ship. Now that I'm happy with the positions for all of the mounts, I can install the photo etch. Each mount has 3 pieces of photo etch. I'm going to start by folding what represents the binoculars and its mounting arms. These are very small pieces, and this photo etch is actually quite thick, which makes these small parts frustratingly difficult to bend. Having said that, these are the binoculars for the ADOs, which are the larger type. I'm going to have to go through a similar process to fold the binoculars for the ALOs, which are substantially smaller. They also are printed on the same thick photo-etch, which makes them even more difficult to fold. Because of their size and because of their tendency to jump out of tweezers, I'm using the photo-etch folding tool to make this a bit easier. Ideally, this would be something that you'd normally fold with tweezers, but the photo-etch is so thick, it just does not bend in tweezers. I've already lost one of these parts. The first one that I tried to bend with tweezers went shooting off somewhere and I've lost track of it. Fortunately, they did provide 2 extras, so losing one is not a big deal. After folding the 4 binoculars for the ADOs, I cut out binoculars for the 6 ALOs. As you can see, these are tiny. Once again, I used the photo-etch folding tool. Even with the photo-etch folding tool, these parts were popping off. It was very frustrating. In the end, the best technique that I figured out to fold these is to start by folding the flaps for the binoculars up by clamping it in this way. Once this fold is in, I remove it, flip it around, and then insert it in and hold it down using tweezers so that if it does want to jump off, I can at least catch it with the tweezers. Once the binocular flaps are folded into position, I can then work on folding the arms. I found that it was best to clamp one arm with the photo-etch folding tool, and while it's positioned like that, fold both arms. Essentially, just wrap the top one around. The next bit of photo-etch that needs folding are these circular pieces that go on the top of the brass base that are used to mount the binoculars. These components have very small tabs that need to be folded up. In this case, the photo-etch, although still thick, it is possible to fold it with a blade, and to contain them and stop them from shooting around the room, leave one side attached to the fret. That way I don't have to worry about them escaping. These circular mounting plates only have one tab on them, so after I've folded all of them up into position, I can install the binocular onto this tab. Once again, I'm going to leave the parts attached to the fret. That's just going to make them easier to handle and make it more difficult for me to lose them. To install the binoculars, I apply a small drop of extra thick superglue to the tab, and then carefully position the binoculars on the tab. Since these parts are so small, they are immediately held in place by the superglue, even when it's completely wet. While the ALOs are drying, I can move on to preparing the bases for the ADOs. These are larger and they have tabs on both sides. Again, I keep these components attached to the fret during the folding process. First, I fold up the tab that I have detached from the fret, and then I fold the base up while the second tab is still attached to the fret. Obviously, with the components in this position, it will be impossible for me to install the binoculars, so I now have to remove them from the fret. Hopefully these parts being a little bit larger will make it more difficult for me to lose them. But we will see. By now, the ALOs have sufficiently dried, so I can also cut them off the sprue. On the other side, as I previously said, there isn't a tab, so I just cut it right at the edge of the circular mounting point. The next thing that I need to do is going to require some real precision. In this circular mount, there is a tiny hole in the center of it. That needs to be aligned with this tiny pin at the top of the mount. This is now beyond the ability of me to see without some form of magnification. So I break out the magnifying glass, set it up pretty close to the mount point, and then give it a go. To install the circular mounts, I'm going to use extra thin superglue. I place a tiny drop of extra thin superglue on the pin at the top of the mount, and then gently place the circular mount onto the pin. Here, the difficulty is making sure that pin goes through the hole in the circular mount. As I say, it is very difficult to see. You get to watch this on 4K, you can zoom in and see what's happening. It's very small. It's very difficult to do without any magnification. Something that I've been considering buying for a while, but I don't really know what to buy, is a loupe. I know you get like the monocle ones, and you also get ones that come in the form of glasses. But what I'm unsure of is what magnification to get, or if there's, a better type. I just don't know what to buy. Fortunately, I'm still able to make do with my mounted magnifying glass. When that becomes a problem, I guess I'm going to have to revisit how I see what I'm doing in situations like this. If anybody has a good recommendation for a loupe or some kind of magnifying glasses, let me know. Now it's time to work on the ADOs. I have not yet installed the binoculars onto the mounts for the ALOs because I cut them off of the sprue and I didn't have a nice way of holding them. So what I need to do before I install the binoculars is to install the base onto the mount. This is basically the same as for the ALOs, just a little bit more easy because everything is just slightly bigger. Once the circular mounting point is installed on the base, I can then install the binoculars. In this case, I apply a small drop of extra thick superglue to each of the tabs and then bring the binoculars into contact. Once again, these parts are so small and light that even while the glue is wet, it immediately holds the binoculars in place. This process has to be completed 4 times. Once all the binoculars are mounted, one last thing needs to be done. The seats need to be folded and installed. Following the same process as I established before, I leave the seats attached to the fret while I fold them into position. Essentially, this means folding the backrest up. And then once they are correctly folded, I remove them from the sprue. To install the seat onto the mount for the binoculars, I dip the end of the seat structure into a small drop of extra thick superglue, which leaves a thin layer of it on this curved section of the mounting point, and then I carefully bring it into contact with the base. This requires a bit of precision, so once again I'm doing this from behind a magnifying glass. To help keep things aligned, I've positioned it on a line on the cutting mat. I'm using that as a sort of guide to help me bring in the seat straight. The process seems to work quite well, and although these are very small and delicate components, installing the seats actually wasn't that difficult. Unfortunately, this kit only has 8 seats, and I have 10 ALOs and ADOs that need seats. Well, technically 2 of them are not ALOs, they're those unknown things that go at the front of the upper air defense platform. So I suppose them not having seats won't be too bad because it'll make them look different to all the other things. So maybe that's actually better. Anyways, they're not going to get seats because I don't have seats for them. After installing the seats, the construction for the ALOs and ADOs is complete. That means they are now ready for paint and installation, which is what I'll be doing in the next video. If you would like to support this channel or see how this ship looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.